Hello, hello. Thank you for joining me in my studies today. 20 weeks ago, I began to externalize my studies of a book a week by sharing the passages that are most prominent to me in vocal reading form. This week, I have been reading from Alan Watts' Cloud Hidden, Whereabouts Unknown, a Mountain Journal, and today will be my final day reading from this book. Something that I don't want to fail to mention before I finish my vocal readings of this book is that many of these essays are available in lecture or audio format in Alan Watts' voice. Nothing can match that, and I highly recommend listening to those if you haven't. What happens when we recognize ourselves as the whole happening of the sacred all, rather than an alienated self applying its mechanisms of control upon the world? And what happens when we free ourselves from the barriers of symbols for real material that so confuse us, confusing the map with the territory and money for wealth? Alan Watts suggests that what we find there is a harmony that makes the restraints of regulation and authority unnecessary. Compassion, care, love, resonant concern for all, discipline is what we find there. Without further ado, I'll get to the readings.
Ordinary self-control is the domination of one's behavior by the selfish self. Its love is assumed, pretensive, and dutiful. Its righteousness is hypocritical. Its chastity issues in cruelty. Its spiritual ideals are highbrow ways of inflating the ego. Its profuse confessions of sin are subtle ways of one-upping more ordinary people. And its beneficence has an odd way of arousing resentment in its recipients. Page 173. You yourself are the eternal energy which appears as this universe. You didn't come into this world, you came out of it, like a wave from the ocean. You are not a stranger here. On the contrary, everything that happens to you, everything that you experience is your karma, your own doing. Page 174. Every individual is, as it were, God in disguise, playing hide and seek with himself through the ages of eternity. God is not, in this Hindu view, the universal monarch and governor of Jewish and Christian theology, but rather the player and actor of the world, playing all the parts of life so rapidly and intensely that he forgets himself and becomes identified with each of them. Every role he assumes is also audience to all the others, and the play is performed so convincingly that the audience takes it for real. Alan Watts goes on to describe the two principal ways by which you may become free through Indian philosophy. The first, detachment and asceticism. The second, which he focuses in on in this chapter, is Tantra. The opposite, not withdrawal from life, but the fullest possible acceptance of one's desires, feelings, and situation as a human being. If you are the Godhead, the universal self, fascinated with the particular existence of John Doe, then just be that and do that to the full. Explore the fascination of desire, love, and lust to its limit. Accept and enjoy without reservation the ego that you seem to be. And the following is a description of the discovery that the tantric practitioner comes to. Through this intense exploration of sensory experience, he discovers two things. First, that existence or energy is at root a simple alternation or vibration of on and off, yes and no. Now you see it, now you don't, which is capable of infinite complication, as all numbers can be represented with the symbols 0 and 1. He learns that the yes or on element of energy cannot be experienced without contrast with the no or off. and therefore that darkness and death are by no means the mere absence of light and life, but rather their origin. In this way, the fear of death and nothingness is entirely overcome. Page 176. The very word Tantra is connected with the art of weaving and denotes the interdependence of warp and woof in woven cloth. The one cannot hold together without the other. Second, he discovers that existence is basically a kind of dancing or music, an immensely complex energy pattern, which needs no explanation other than itself. Tantra is therefore a marvelous and welcome corrective to certain excesses of Western civilization. We over-accentuate the positive, think of the negative as bad, and thus live in a frantic terror of death and extinction, which renders us incapable of playing life with an air of noble and joyous detachment. Failing to understand the musical quality of nature, which fulfills itself in an eternal present, we live for a tomorrow which never comes, like an orchestra racing to attain the finale of a symphony. But through understanding the creative power of the female, of the negative, of empty space, and of death, we may at least become completely alive in the present. The individual is an aperture through which the whole energy of the universe is aware of itself, a vortex of vibrations in which it realizes itself as man or beast, flower or star, not alone, but as central to all that surrounds it. These centers are not, as it may seem, apart from their surroundings, but stand in mutual relationship to them, center to circumference, in the same way as the magnetic poles. It is thus that each center anywhere implies all other centers elsewhere. There is, between space and entity, the same polar relationship as between crest and trough, for which reason nothingness is not simply the contrary or absence of being, but rather its ground and origin. To feel polar vision is to feel that what happens to you is your own doing, and that your own doing is happening to you, that death and emptiness are the firm ground upon which life walks, and that oneself, as both center and surround, is the eternal universe. But this feeling or intuition does not come in the form of words or ideas, and does not depend on any trick of imagination or self-suggestion. It is more as when one simply sees blue sky or feels that one is alive. All that needs to be experienced for cosmic consciousness is already present, and anything in excess of this would be obstructive and redundant, like red ink on a rose. Page 186. One can be beguiled into various ways of trying to meditate, and a competent guru will suggest techniques so clever that their absurdity will be difficult to discover without resolute attempts to follow them through. Furthermore, the aspirations and minor successes of other seekers will compound a collective illusion, and even a mutual one-upmanship contest of believing that this or that method or guru is at last the one that really works. Yet the intention of the guru himself is simply to exhaust the energy of the illusion by bringing his disciples again and again to experiences of the absurdity of trying to transform mind with mind. Page 187. This unobstructed flow is the Tao, the way or course of nature, and is also what is meant by the state of non-attachment, a spontaneous, unforced, and unblocked flowing of life. Yet the prospect of such flowing as a way of life gives us intense moral anxiety, for at once there are qualms about unleashing the tigers and demons within us if no control is exercised. But such qualms are, again, symptoms of the same old illusion. What if there has been no controlling self all along? Contemplation as a particular exercise done in a formal way is simply the ritual enjoyment of that basic awareness of what is happening now, which goes on always from moment to moment. In the same way, dancing as dancing is the ritual form of dancing while cooking or dancing with the pen while writing. It is therefore quite against the spirit of such contemplation to undertake it in a mood of grim seriousness. The good of contemplation is contemplation, not some result that it may bring. Contemplation ceases as soon as there is any seeking for results. Such temptations as these beset ritual contemplation in the same way as playing a musical instrument may be used for ends extraneous to the enjoyment of music, as in competing with oneself or with others for musical status. We have been trying to harness technology to the impossible game of having positive without negative, defying the principles of that very electricity upon which technology so largely depends. This objective is as illusory as the ego which seeks it. A time when the objective seems clearly unattainable is a time ripe for the unmasking of that ego, itself the persona mask which conceals the splendor of our original face. When spring comes, the buds break out of their husks, the little birds cast off their shells, and young plants burst from their seed casings. When there is a crack in the cosmic egg, Buddha is about to be born. Here on page 205 will be the concluding passage. Like a flawless crystal or lens, emptiness makes form perfectly clear, and this is why space, of which one is aware without being able to form an image of it, is the nearest we can get to an idea of God, and also to an apprehension of one's own unseen aspect. A most curious consequence follows. As transparency or emptiness lends clarity and definition to form, I find that the more I understand that I myself am the happening and can make no mistake, the more I appreciate every kind of careful and formal discipline and technique. You are somehow free to do things lovingly and well when you realize that you are not doing anything out of duty or obligation to an overlord. When you no longer make the distinction between the universe and how you are acting upon it, you are really on your own, and so you acquire a sense of responsibility. And to the degree that we develop, or that there grows in us, this sense of compassionate, as distinct from anxious, carefulness, we shall be able to do without the state, just as we have been learning to do without the church.